Circus is coming through. Everybody knows that when you purchase a ticket, you expect to get a show. Take a look at me. I'm just a clown.
All right, we're rolling, man. So welcome to Mid-Coast Scuba Podcast. Here with my buddy Chris Boudens. And this episode, we're going to talk about dry suits. But dry suit diving. Before we start that off, though, I got a present for you. You're about to be a dad again.
Yeah,
right?
I am.
Got a little boy on the way. And so I got something for you.
Sweet. Little cookie monster. Oh, that's cool, man. Oh, shit.
There's a bunch of them.
There's a bunch of them.
Buy in bulk. It's all right.
Where did you get these?
I made them.
Sorry, folks, I fell. You made these?
Yeah.
These are dope. Oh, these are awesome. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, no
Thank
problem.
you. Cheers.
Yeah, cheers to you.
Cheers to you, man. We just clank glasses.
Clank.
Man, I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, dry suits. Pretty for Midwest divers, it's most people don't jump right into dry suits because there's a pretty significant investment in them. But if you're going to be a serious diver around here and you want to extend your season, you almost have to get one, right?
I mean, I think the issue I run into, like, as an instructor, we don't really have the resources around here to, at least that I know of off the top of my head, that where people can go rent a dry suit, try it out, get certified in it, and then that's where they realize the benefit of the suit. That's the problem. You around, at least in this area, you tell people you'll like a dry suit, it has these benefits, and then you're like, yeah, but you got to fork out like $2,500.
Yeah.
And that's just on the suit. That's not the undergarments. That's not, if you're going rock boots, that's not installing a P valve. That's not installing all the others. There's all these bells and whistles you can add to it.
Well, and for a new, what I'll classify as a new diver that's getting real serious about diving, they probably just dropped that much, if not a multiple of that, on their BCD and regs and everything else. And then now they're like, oh God, now I need to drop another $2,500 on a dry suit.
I mean, even as an experienced diver, a diver with all too much equipment, as my wife would say. I mean, I just dropped retail $4,400 on a suit and undergarments. Now I went with a high-end suit that's, all the bells and whistles. I went with the Scuba Force, their Expedition SC. It's sized to me. It's got my name tapes sewed into the pocket. It's like, oh yeah, I went fancy, buddy. But retail, that suit was like $3,900, and then I bought a pair of their undergarments.
No.
Then you slap in a Halcyon P valve, a balanced P valve, and then you slap on. I made sure it had the Kevlar on every part that it needed. But then again, the type of diving I'm doing, I needed that kind of suit.
Yeah.
Not saying that there aren't other suits out there that are great, but it's a German company. Scuba Force is a German company. They're kind of rare in the United States, but they make very, very high quality products.
Yeah.
It still hurts paying that kind of money, and I understand the benefit of diving dry. In fact, I was supposed to pick it up today, but they didn't get the P valve installed, so I got to drive down to Wichita Monday to go pick it up. And I was kind of hoping to have it today, so Monday I could go do a dive.
Go try it out.
Yeah, go test it out. It's an excuse to get in the water.
Yeah.
But
dry suits are interesting, especially when you're, when I'm teaching open water students. I know you've experienced this too. You talk about the gear, and a lot of times, somebody who's as green as it gets to diving has no idea what the difference between a dry suit and a wetsuit is. But the dry suit, I think one of the most interesting things that people first learn about them is they actually do little to nothing to keep you warm.
No, yeah, they don't. It's all your undergarment.
Yeah. And you explain that to people, and it's like, oh, how cold can you go? Well, it depends on what you wear underneath it, right?
I've told people I could go down to the lake with a dry suit, and I can just take like a long t-shirt and like some sort of like sweat wicking long pants. And the reason why you want the long undergarments, for people who don't know, so your skin doesn't stick to the inside of the suit.
Yeah.
Because you're going to sweat. And I can be in 85, 90 degree water, and I'm comfortable.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, then just get out of the water and go, okay, now I'm going to go down to 60, 80, 100 feet deeper than that. You get down to 130, 140 feet in that lake, it's 40 degrees.
Yeah.
Well, now I can throw on really thick undergarments, slap my dry suit on over it, and I can go do that dive. So there's some versatility there, really, when you think about it, because your undergarments determine your warmth.
Yeah.
So that is a added benefit. I definitely know that another added benefit to dry suits, if you're doing overhead environments, is it's a protection aspect.
Yeah.
A lot of the guys dive in Truck Lagoon, for example, they're diving dry, even though it's 86 degree South Pacific water. Well, they're penetrating these wrecks that are still leaking oil. So they're just protecting themselves from getting that oil and the diesel and everything else that's seeping out of these wrecks onto their skin.
Right.
So, there's multiple reasons why you should dive dry, in my opinion, or a benefit of diving dry.
Well, and it's definitely something. It's definitely something that warrants to, whenever somebody kind of starts to have that interest in wanting to dive dry. It's not the sort of deal. I guess what I'm trying to say is there's definitely a skill set to diving a dry suit. It's not like a wetsuit where any diver can throw a wetsuit on and be okay. There's a fairly significant learning curve on how to dive it, how to put it on, everything. Right?
That's actually like a giant topic I really kind of wanted to get into.
Yeah.
So just recently I went down to Bonaire, did my mod 2 with Zach Richardson.
Yep.
Him and his wife got the opportunity to go up, and I am not prepared for this. Recently there was a girl that passed away on a dive in a dry suit, because it was an adventure dive in a dry suit, and the instructor that was doing the adventure dive, if I remembered her name, I would throw her under the bus right now.
Yeah.
She was not a dry suit instructor, did not put an inflation hose, overweighted her. In my opinion, I'll just say it. I know this is on the internet's forever. In my opinion, she should be charged with manslaughter.
Well, there's definitely some gross negligence involved.
Massive gross negligence. And, I feel like they're listening to Zach talk about it because he's really close to the family.
Yeah.
And they went up and did the memorial dive for her with her brother. There's a lot of aspects to that. That's a whole ball of wax.
You could almost do a whole. Yeah, throwing on top of that, like I've spoke to people that actually dove that spot too, and relayed that it's not even really a safe place to do a discover dive.
No, it's from what I was described at, the bottom topography was basically it's a glacier cut lake.
Yeah,
and it's just a steep drop down to deep and cold.
Yeah.
Plus with really shit visibility. However, I guess the point I'm trying to make with all this is I've had people tell me, oh, I can just go buy a dry suit. Why do I need to take a class? Because you could kill yourself. I mean, it's that simple. You're dealing with an airspace that expands and contracts. And if you don't know how to, I would say the worst case is a squeeze on the deep end. And then as you're coming up, you could overexpand and have a runaway ascent. And if you don't know how to fix that, I've personally had an inflator stick on me in a cave that I was exploring by myself, pin me to the ceiling. That's a no shit moment.
Yeah.
So you definitely need good instruction. And I would say you need good instruction with anything you're doing.
Sure.
Get an instructor that knows that dives what they're teaching.
Yeah. Well, you never know what you don't know, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's why when I pick instructors for classes, I do like Mod 2, for example. I went down and dive with Zach Richardson because he's very knowledgeable and he knows what he's doing, and it's. I chose him as an instructor because I knew I was going to get a good class.
Right.
So, yeah, dry suits are something that it's not just like throwing on a wetsuit. There is more to it. But even on the non serious end of it, it's getting in and out of it, putting it on, getting in and out of it, getting dressed the proper way to do it. There's a right way and a wrong way. I hate to say it. There's really not, but anybody who dives dry knows that there's a system you have developed on getting in and out of your dry suit.
Yeah, and you'll almost kind of come up with your own little kind of personal steps of, okay, this arm goes in, and then if I twist this arm this way, then it goes on nice and easy. I personally, I love my dry suit, but I have a love-hate relationship with it.
1,000%.
It's when you're you're doing a freshwater dive and you're going to go down fairly deep and cold, and it's August and you're about to have a heat stroke, that's when you kind of hate it.
Yeah. Or when you haven't dove it in like 3 or 4 months or 5 months or however long it's been because you've been teaching open water classes. You've been like, it's easier. I'm going to slap on a wetsuit. And then you're like, ooh, am I going to fit in you? Because I've been eating a lot of pizza lately.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. Like, these suits there's no forgiveness in them.
Yeah.
Like a wetsuit will stretch a little bit.
Yeah.
Especially with some of these new materials. You get a dry suit, it's like, okay, it fits, but will it fit with my thick stuff on?
Yeah.
And that's where I ended up having to buy a new suit, sadly. Is my dry suit, it fit, but it wouldn't fit with my thick stuff. And that's the whole point of the suit, right? Yeah. So I bit the bullet and decided it's easier to get a new suit instead of actually lose weight and get in shape.
Well, it's savage, right? Especially when you're with with buddies that love to bust your balls. And it was last almost a little over a year ago. I went down to Rube and was diving with a buddy, and he broke out his dry suit, and he hadn't had it out forever. And I 9 out of 10 thought that I was going to have to break out the EMT shears and cut him out of it because there was no way it was coming back off.
I'm surprised he got into it.
Me too.
Like from how you describe that, like that's just crazy to me.
It was so tight. He had so much crap on underneath it.
Yeah.
So
I mean, there are some definite downsides to diving dry.
Yeah.
You can't pee in them.
Well,
you got to get a pee valve. You can, but you're gonna pee yourself.
Well, but I mean, with the pee valve, right?
Yeah. You know what I hate? I hate when people. I heard this when I first got into dry suit diving. Well, the best part about dry suits, I put a dry suit on, I get out of the water, I take it off, and I'm just ready to go out to have dinner because I'm dry.
Yeah.
I'm like, really? Because I am nasty when I get out of those things.
Yeah.
I'm sweaty. I'm gross. I got a funk to me because a month before I did some thick undergarment dives, and so I didn't really like air the thing out.
Yeah.
And that's another thing let's talk about. The maintenance. There's a little bit more maintenance. We can get into that here in a minute, but yeah, but I think let's kind of recap on what are some of the positives of a dry suit for you?
Yeah, for me, it's the comfort. It's I definitely can go a lot longer in colder water in a dry suit than I can wet, even if I'm wearing a really thick, like a 7 mil or something like that. Look, I know we talk about the tech side of it a lot, but looking at that side of it too, it does give me a redundant buoyancy system if I need it. My wing craps out, I can go off of the wing. I know that's one of the kind of the ways we dive them differs a little bit. I dive mine comfort, dive wing for buoyancy. I know you're the opposite. Well, you do dive for comfort, but you also use the dry suit for buoyancy, which is fine. There's those two kind of sects of how they people generally dive them.
Yeah.
But like you said too, the versatility is huge, right? Like I've dove it. I've dove it before just in shorts and a t-shirt when it was hot. I just needed something to put on to get in the water, right?
Yeah.
Those are the positives of it. Just the versatility, really. Versatility, the redundant buoyancy. Those are some things that I can think of on it.
Well, and extending your dive season.
Extending your dive season.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I think that's the biggest. If you know, when we talk about some of the negatives, I think the biggest positive, especially for around here, is you've extended your dive season all year round.
Right.
The lakes are only going to fluctuate so many degrees, just like the ocean. Especially down like where we're at. Now you get up to the Great Lakes, they do get covered in ice, but you know, underneath that ice, the water temperature is a certain degree.
Yeah. Well, and I would say I'd throw out too, it really ties in the versatility part of it, but if you were tied down and you could only have one exposure system, the dry suit would cover you for everything.
Correct.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of positive to diving dry, as we like to say. But now let's talk about some of the negatives, because I think we've kind of touched base on some of the negatives, but let's kind of list out some of the negatives here, because I feel like some people are like, well, because when you weigh anything out in life, in my opinion, you got to look at the positives and the negatives.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
So I to me, one of the big negatives on dry suit is the cost and maintenance.
Yeah.
They are expensive, and you do have to put some maintenance into them. You can't just ball it up and throw it in a box in your storage unit like a wetsuit.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to maintain the zipper. You have to they do have a shelf life of some degree to where you're eventually, no matter how good the suit is, you're gonna replace the zipper. You're gonna replace seals. You're gonna replace seams. Hopefully not, but I've had suits where I've had to reseam the entire damn suit. Now so they can be very frustrating and financially frustrating.
Yeah, and if you got a P valve, you got to sterilize it every time you get back.
And
unless you want a raging UTI.
And if you have a balanced P valve, the diaphragm in there wears out over time, and then it will seep and leak where you're getting cold water up there.
Yeah.
And that's when you go, dang it, and you got to get a replacement kit, to service it. Now you can do it yourself, which is nice. It's not hard. It's just replacing a mushroom valve. Right. It's real easy, but at the same time, it's still a thing that requires care.
Yeah. Well, and I know it's something you get used to as well, so I don't know if it's really a negative, but I don't feel like I have as much freedom of motion in my dry suit as I do in a wetsuit. You get kind of used to it and you learn how to kind of deal with that. But that's one of the things, especially when I'm diving side mount. If I've got to reach back to my D-rings, it's a little bit tougher in my dry suit than it is in my wet.
So, and a lot of that is getting a proper fitting suit.
Right.
So it's less forgiving than a wetsuit.
Yeah.
You definitely need to get a proper fitting suit. The most ideal way to do it is to get it measured to you, like the suit I'm getting.
Yeah.
It's going to be cut to me. Hard part about that, now the negative of that is if I wanted to resell this suit, if I decided, I want to go with something else, it's going to be hell to resell this suit.
Yeah.
Because it's cut and measured to me. It's not a large, it's not an extra large. It's kind of a mix between.
Right.
And they're more expensive to get measured to you. And some places don't even do measure to you anymore. They'll do some basic measurements, but you start getting into where they will literally take, I think what you helped me measure, it was like 70 something measurements.
Oh, there was a boatload. I mean, it was,
and it took us like
real
an
close
hour,
and
we had to, you did. Thank you. You touched my nether regions. But it it was a process, and you send it off, and then it takes 6 to 8 weeks from them to make your suit. Basically, they're making it from scratch. So yeah, there are some, but so yeah, you definitely lose some dexterity in a dry suit.
Yeah.
Which for some people is not fun, and if you get that squeeze,
you
really lose dexterity because you can't move because the suit's basically ziplocking you in. So
it's always kind of funny. Well, it's funny when they're being safe. You know, you always kind of bust your buddy's balls a little bit. But I remember one buddy in particular when he got his dry suit and he was just having a hard time with it. He got when he was taking his cavern class, he got pinned to the ceiling in Rubidoo because he didn't know how to properly vent it. And
I remember that.
And, but so after that, he dove it. He dove it really tight, and I still remember when he came out. And this was months after that. He comes up out of the water and he strips it off, and he's got this big black bruise right in his sternum, in the shape of the inflator. He looked like Iron Man's deal that he has in his chest.
Yeah,
because it had been squeezed up against him for so long. It's like, dude. But you know, that's kind of one of the things which is kind of interesting. And I would say anybody that gets a dry suit, I think for the most part, you hear I don't want to say a lot, but you hear a decent number of people that get a dry suit and then they're like, nah, it's just not for me. And they've only dove it like 3 or 4 times. You really do have to stay on top of it a few times and keep diving it until that comfort level pops up. That's when you really start enjoying it.
I totally agree. I honestly, I dive dry even teaching classes when I probably don't need to.
Yeah.
And it's not so much I'm trying to look cool. I'm trying to, you know, I'm doing it honestly because it's just keeping me current with it, because then when I need to use it, I don't want to be rusty with it.
Right.
You know, like in November, I went down and dove the Oriskany,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a couple guys say to me, a couple friends of mine, I'm not going to throw their names out there. They're like, why are you taking your dry suit? Like, dive it wet. Like, it's 5 mil weather. You know, it's 5 mil. That's all you need. Well, it's November.
Yeah.
The water temperature was cooler. It was in the 70s. That's definitely 5 mil territory.
Yeah.
But I was diving Trimix.
Yeah.
And I got cold.
Yeah.
And even I was wearing the thinnest stuff because I couldn't wear thicker stuff in that suit. Hence why I bought a new suit. But I was getting cold because I had an hour of deco.
Yeah.
And you're just hanging out, decompressing, not moving. You get cold, 76-degree water. I was a 2-hour dive. You know, I mean, it was...
Well, and that's another thing to throw in the pro category too, because I know sometimes if I know I'm going to have a long surface interval, I'll choose dry over wet just because at the surface, you're a lot warmer than you are in the wetsuit.
Mm-hmm.
You just really, really luff that thing up and get a lot of air in there. And
like fall teaching.
Yeah. Yeah.
Down here, like fall, I'll dive dry. The water is actually warm, but you get out and that wind hits you because it's starting to get down in the 50s and the 60s. It's like you see everybody in hoodies shivering, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm good. I'm dry. I feel great.
Fill it up when you get out, and good to go.
Or just crack it a little bit, and get that airspace in there, and you're just like,
that's the best feeling.
That is the best feeling in the world.
Yeah,
that's like right up there with taking a big dump.
It is like a full body. I don't know.
I'll say it. Orgasm.
Yeah, when you crack that seal and your whole body kind of tingles and shivers as that air kind of comes in, and
it's like instant warmth too. Like when it's weird because when it's cold out, it's like with that dry suit ziplock to your body.
Yeah,
like that wind hits it. And it's you can feel it. And then as soon as you crack it and get a little bit of airspace, because that's exactly how a dry suit works.
Yeah.
It's keeping air trapped against your body, which your body warms up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's keeping you warm. So if that is ziplocked to you, it's not doing anything.
Right. Got to
have that air in there.
Well, and it's a weird sensation too the first time you dive one. I remember when I was doing my dry suit class, I was in it starts off in the pool, and it just so happened that the shop pool was closed down, or the shop was closed down for this week or whatever, and so the heater was off and the pool was freezing, which is perfect for doing a dry suit class. But the first time I stepped into the water wearing a dry suit, because it doesn't do anything to insulate you or keep you warm, you feel the cold of the water through the dry suit against your skin.
Yeah.
And the first thought I had was, oh shit, this thing's flooding.
Yeah.
Because you just feel
like
cold.
you're flooding.
And it's kind of weird. It takes you a little bit to kind of desensitize your brain to that.
Well, until you actually flood.
Right.
Or you actually have a hole in your sock like I did.
Right.
Yeah. Once you have that experience, you know, like, okay, no, this is just normal.
Right.
Or versus, okay, yeah, I got a hole because I feel sloshy in my toes.
Right.
Like, there's a different feeling.
Right.
Yeah, but no, I remember that. Were you actually? Was I with you that day?
Yeah,
you
you
like
were.
I was.
Yeah,
was
you
that,
were.
Was that when you were a dive master, or you just become an instructor, didn't you?
No, I was still dive master at that point.
Okay, yeah, well, you were helping me out.
Yeah,
that was perfect because I didn't have to get in the water.
yeah, it was fun. That was it couldn't have worked out better for doing a dry suit, doing your first part of the class in the pool, at the pool not having the heat on it, being absolutely freezing. It's like,
well, what's funny is I actually try to tell people, if you're going to take a dry suit class, this is, and hence why we're doing it.
Yeah.
This time of year, it's end of February, it's beginning of March. You know, it's what is it, 60 degrees out today? It was like 70 almost.
Yeah, it was some mid upper 60s.
But that water is still going to be like 40, 45 degrees.
Yeah.
So it's like, this is the perfect time to dive a dry suit.
Yep.
Because the water's cold. You get to really, you know, when you get a student in the lake and it's like 50, 60, so it's not miserably cold out.
Yeah.
So you're gearing up, but they're not dripping in sweat. They're comfortable, and then they get in the water and they're like, ooh, and then they dive, and then they look at their computer and they're like, oh my God, that water was 48 degrees. Yeah. That's the benefit of the dry suit. They really see it. So this is the best time of year, in my opinion, to dive dry. Yeah.
Well, and then also, you know, just like for freshwater too, this time of year, the water is going to be as clear as it's going to be. Right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So.
I've taken students down to do dry suit classes down at Beaver Lake, and they're like, I've never seen, like, we dove the same site. We got into the dive park, and they're like, I couldn't believe how much I could see. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the clearest the lake gets. This is the perfect time because it's right before the lake's going to flip.
Yeah.
Give it another month, that lake's going to flip. Another month or two, the lake's going to flip.
Yeah.
And come May, when I take my first class down, it's going to be terrible.
Yeah.
We're not going to be able to see shit.
Yeah. 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 So there's a few different, it's not just dry suit, right? So there's a few different kinds. What kind did you get? Did you get a laminate? Did you get what'd you get?
So I got a tri-lam.
Tri-lam, okay.
So I like the tri-lams.
Yep.
Not from Revenge of the Nerds. It's a tri-laminate suit. So they're taking 3 pieces of material, they're laminating them together in a machine with glue, and that creates a waterproof barrier. Typically held together by either you can get a bead seam, which a bead seam would be like aqua seal bead seam, or a tape seam, or both.
Yeah.
I chose both. I got to choose my seal, or I got to choose my seams, which was nice. Reason why is I just went double or nothing because I had a tri-lam suit that delaminated.
Yeah.
And that was miserable because there's no fixing it once the suit starts to delaminate. So there's a negative of a tri-lam. It is man-made. Think of it like plywood.
Yeah, it can come apart.
It can come apart.
Yeah.
However, the tri-laminates are lighter.
Yeah.
You can do more with them. And what I say by that is they added Kevlar to mine on the knees, the shoulders, the butt, the elbows, places where it could get exposed to rubbing. But then again, I do overhead environments, whether it's wrecks or caves. They put Kevlar over that, which is a need for me.
Yeah.
So I personally like the tri-laminate suits because they are lighter. It is a lighter material, and then they can add like extra material on top of it.
Yeah. 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 So there's tri-laminate. There's rubber dry suits. Those are mostly
vulcanized.
vulcanized.
Rubber,
Those are the ones that you see most of the time. The public safety divers are the.
So those are non-porous.
Yeah.
So those are good for public safety divers. They're heavy because it's vulcanized rubber. I don't think they really have seams. It's just like a giant piece, and then they have like one or two seams. They don't have many seams.
Typically more there for them trying to avoid exposure to chemicals and things like that, right?
So the thing about the vulcanized rubber, like, so if I dove in contaminated water with like hazardous materials, I can't decontaminate the tri-lam.
Right.
It is still a porous material. Per NFPA OSHA standards, I can't decontaminate. The vulcanized rubber, on the other hand, you can decontaminate. Hence why public safety divers and people like that would use those.
Yeah.
People ask me all the time, do commercial divers use dry suits? No, they dive like a jumpsuit, and they shove a hose in, and they actually pump hot water into it. That's how they stay warm. But they're down there for hours.
Yeah.
Your dry suit is only effective for so long, right? Because it's
well, you can put heated vest inside.
Oh, that's a whole nother that's a whole section we'll get into.
I got one. I can't wait to use it.
What? You bought one?
Yeah.
Oh, damn.
So
I'm about to try it out.
Yeah, it's
steal it from you.
It actually will fit both of us because it's got an insert, so I can make it big for Chunky Zach, and we can make it fit. It would fit you too. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Who's it by? Sorry, people. We're getting off topic here.
Yeah, Venture Heat. Yeah,
Venture Heat.
So it can be worn wet or dry. It's got sealed integrated batteries in it.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so I might have to take a look at this. I might have to get one.
My first lake class is in late May, and don't think for a minute. I'm sorry, students, if you listen to this, I will be wearing it and be toasty warm. Well,
I'm like the first weekend in May. I might be borrowing it.
But so then there's also crushed
neoprene.
Yeah. Now that dry suit actually does have some insulation in it.
Yeah, so that's actually the one dry suit you can get that you don't need undergarments for because it's neoprene. So it's going to have its own thermal protection to the suit itself. However, that dry suit is extremely buoyant, extremely bulky, and extremely heavy. I'm not personally not a fan of the crushed neoprene.
Yeah.
But again, it's all preference.
Yeah.
That's what I tell people. I personally like tri-lams because they're light.
Yeah.
And then I get to choose my undergarments. Some people are like, I like the crushed neoprene because I already get thermal protection, so now I don't have to buy those heavy, bulky undergarments.
Yeah, I've never dove a crushed neoprene, but I've talked to people who had, and from what I understand, they're kind of a pain in the ass to get into.
Yeah, they are. Now, you also, and those you'll typically more see a semi-dry suit.
Yeah. So
if you guys are wondering out there, like, what's the difference? A semi-dry suit won't have an inflator valve on it.
Yeah.
A dry suit, a crushed neoprene dry suit will.
Yeah.
Semi-dry, basically what it does is it seals around the wrists and the ankles and the neck tight enough.
Still lets water in.
Still lets some water in.
But it really limits
limits how much water gets in. And I know people that swear by those.
Yeah.
Personally, not a fan.
Yeah.
That's just me. Again, it's a personal preference, and I think that goes back into any kind of thermal layering.
Yeah.
I mean, we could do a whole nother topic or a whole nother podcast on how I recommend like what wetsuits and what thermal protection students buy. I'm like,
yeah.
It just depends. Like
that's a tough question to answer, right? You got to look at a lot of things like where do you see yourself diving most,
Well, even that, look at the instructors that next time you go diving on your dive trip down to the Bahamas or Grand Cayman or St. Croix, look at the people that live down there, they're instructors. They're diving 5 mils with hoods.
Well, yeah,
and you're in a rash guard and a swim trunks.
Yeah. Well,
it's
point.
They're
point
desensitized.
Right. Well, they're in it all the time. Right?
They're in it all the time. So to them, 86-degree water is chilly.
Right.
They're in it all day, every day. They live in places where don't have air conditioning, so they get used to your body gets used to the heat. Versus you take a Midwest diver like Zach and myself. Oh, that's a funny story actually about Richardson. I gotta tell you. I'll tell that next. We go down to the Caribbean and we're in shorts and a rash guard.
Yeah. Yeah. Like doing big, long deco tech dives and bathing suit and
on Trimix. Yeah. And they're looking at us like we're insane. We're like, I'm fine. I feel comfortable. This is sweating. Nice. Yeah. So the first time I met Zach Richardson, who owns CDS Bonaire, lives in Bonaire. He's lived in Bonaire for a while. And he's from Texas. So he's a Southern boy. He's California, Texas kind of guy. Warm water guy. He did our rebreather class in North Florida in the Springs. Yeah. And he sees us getting in the water, and he's putting on a dry suit. He's not really used to dry suits. And he looks at Scott Kramer and myself, and he goes, "You guys aren't wearing hoods?" We're like, "Nah, man, you don't need a hood for this. It's not that cold." Yeah. We get in the water, and he looked at Lamar, and he goes, This is fucking cold. This is bullshit." And we're just over there laughing. Lamar goes, "Those guys fucked with you. They're cold water divers. Yeah. This is warm to them." Yeah. He needed gloves and a hood. Like, he was miserable in those 77-degree springs. And we're just like, this is warm, man. This shit. We're only in a dry suit.
Yeah. Well, in point of contact, Zach, we love you.
Yeah.
Bros,
but I remember that. He could probably tell the story better.
Yeah. But he wears a 5 mil and a hood in 82-degree Bonaire water.
And I'll be honest, when I did my mod 2, I was in a 3 mil. Yeah. And I'm glad I used a 3 mil the whole time. Yeah. Breathe in the helium. And that's another thing too. Yeah. When you start getting in these higher level classes or these higher level courses and you start doing Trimix and things like that, helium really, really restricts the way your body can regulate its temperature. Yeah. So you're breathing helium, you can't maintain your core temperature as well physiologically, but also you can't pump helium into your dry suit. A, it's super expensive. B,
yeah, you can.
It's a super small molecule, so it doesn't really give you the oomph.
Right. There's no insulin. Yeah.
So you get into actually using air or nitrox or argon. Yeah. Which, have you ever used argon?
I've never tried argon in the dry suit.
I've used it one time, and it was like,
you told a big difference.
It was like pumping heat into your suit.
Yeah.
Because it's such a fat molecule. It's just really...
Yeah, so that's another point of versatility for the dry suit is you can actually choose different gases to put into it based on the,
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that... so what I was going to point out, too, you were talking about people in the Caribbean. Like, did you meet Astrid when you were down in Bonaire?
No, she wasn't there.
So when she did Blake's... rebreather course. She was Blake's rebreather instructor, I should say.
Yeah.
When Patrick and I were getting our mod 2 back in December, she wore a dry suit down there.
What Zach said, he said he dives dry most of the time. He said, honestly, the only reason I'm wearing a wetsuit is because you are.
Yeah.
And I go, you don't have to wear a wetsuit for me.
Right.
But he was wearing a 5 mil.
Yeah.
No, I was wearing a 3 mil.
The thought of putting on a 5 mil in Bonaire just seems crazy to me, but it's that desensitization, it's just that different. I don't want to call it the acclimation. The difference in acclimation between Zach Richardson and Zach Haddock. Plus, I've got a good amount of bioprene on me already.
Yeah,
so a little bit of a polar bear to begin with.
It's protective karate fat.
Protective karate fat. I like it.
So like I'm getting ready next year. I'm going to truck, and it's actually, this is a huge debate, like an internal, personal head debate of mine. Am I bringing my dry suit, or am I just gonna try and do it in a 3 mil? Because we're there for 14 days, and so when it's gonna be deep Trimix dives. At the same time, the water is like 86 degrees.
I
think 3 mil, honestly, and it's probably mostly for the, I'm going to be penetrating wrecks.
Yeah.
I don't care about the exposure to oil. I'm a fireman.
Well,
I get exposed to way more carcinogens than most people ever will in their entire lifetime. So,
on a big trip like that with your rebreather, so that's the other deal too. maybe that could be considered a downside of a dry suit when you're trying to travel with it, unless you got one of the really lightweight ones.
Mine is not going to be lightweight.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. They do not pack down very compactly, and there's some good weight on them. My DUI FLX Extreme, it's a pretty heavy piece of fabric when it's all wrapped up in the bag. So I guess what I'm getting at is, if I was traveling to truck and I had my rebreather and everything else, I'd probably be like, nah, I'm just gonna go with the.
Well, and so I did travel. I've flown a couple times in my dry suit, and the first time I ever flew with a dry suit was I went to California, and not a bad flight. It's an easy flight. It was the one stop in Denver. Dove with the Marissa Charters, great charter operation. I'm going to plug them a little bit here. If you're ever in San Diego, dive Marissa Charters. The breakfast spread they had, phenomenal. It was awesome. And Chris, the dive master on the boat, he was dope. Great guy. And they have a dog on the boat. So
that's cool.
And they can do high, they have a booster pump and O2. So,
right on the boat.
Right on the boat. So if you're doing rebreather or anything crazy like that, they can do Trimix blends right there on the boat. Yeah, It's crazy. So it's full of tech for you guys out there that are tech divers, tech heads. But anyways, dove a couple wrecks out there, and I totally went single tank and got out there and was like, the whole boat was rebreathers and techs. I'm like, what the? Why did I do this? Because I was traveling light.
And you didn't have a rebreather.
And I didn't have a rebreather at the time, but I was a tech diver. But I was like, why didn't I dive side mount? Or my doubles. But no, that was my first time really traveling with a dry suit. And it just sucked because it was like, it wasn't hard. It just, I had to check another bag.
Yeah.
So like, like going to truck, I'm already checking 2 to 3 bags as it is.
Yeah.
For that time frame. So rebreather will be on my back. Yes, I have a Choptima, so I can do that. Rebreather will be my carry-on. And then I'm gonna have 2 check bags at least.
Yeah.
Clothes, and then as I found out from going to Bonaire, my backplate and doubles and all my rigs and everything, it just the weight limit. I have to do 2 bags.
Yeah. That's something to be cognizant of.
So.
It's,
I'm not, unlike you, I can't do first class. Dick.
Well, that's one of the advantages of flying every other week for work. You
could throw me some miles, bro.
Get some points.
I could use some first class. I've never rode first class my entire life. And every time I'm thinking about doing it, I look and it's like, I could do first class, but for $100, but it's only one leg of this trip.
Well, I will give this travel tip to any divers that are out there that maybe are gear heavy or tech divers. So here's a little tip. Not all the airlines do it. I know United does for certain, but if you watch, if they're not selling the first class tickets, a lot of times you get the option to upgrade for realistically not a whole lot more than what it's going to cost you in your extra baggage fees. But you know what the other side of that is? Everybody in coach has a 50-pound limit. First class has a 75-pound limit.
Did not know that.
Yep. That is huge.
That would have limited me to 1 bag.
That is huge. That lets you get but you get 2 bags included, 75 pounds each.
Okay, so all right, everybody out there, travel tip from Zach Haddock.
So do your math and look at what your baggage fees are going to be, and then see what that first class upgrade is. Because honestly,
we should do a podcast over travel.
Oh, absolutely.
Like how to fly, and we need to have Danko on here because this guy flies all over the world.
Right.
Like now, company man, just getting paid for it. But you want to talk about miles.
Yeah. So. But that's just something to look at. I know, without derailing, getting too far off subject, but the first time we went to Bonaire, when it was me, you, Scott, and Brian.
Yeah.
I was sitting in first class because it was $300 to upgrade to first class. I'm like, well, it's going to cost me $150 for my baggage fees. It's kind of
you were checking like 3 bags, weren't you?
I just checked 2, but it was still, you only get 1. For what you just stuck in my head, I only got 1. So anyway, long story short, it was going to cost $150 in baggage fees. or it was going to cost me $300 to upgrade to first class. Well, that's a no brainer, right? I'll spend the 150 extra bucks. But where I was getting at, so I'm setting up in first class, and you guys are all getting on the plane, and all three of you are punching me in the shoulder while you walk by. The guy sitting next to me is
I
like,
slapped you in the face.
yeah.
Yeah,
But the guy sitting next to me is like, what the hell did you do to those guys? It's like, bro, just.
And of course, Brian's coming walking down, former Army Ranger,
Yeah.
75th Ranger Regiment guy. And he's like 6'5", massive beast. He's got that dead look in his face.
Yeah.
And he's just like, fuck you. And
Fuck
smacks you.
Yeah. Like,
People are like, what did you do? I don't want to be next to you.
Sipping on my mimosa.
Yeah. Your free alcohol drinks in first class.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what's funny? I got a little story about that.
Yeah.
If you don't mind hearing it, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So when we were going to Bon Air, when I was going to Bon Air by myself, I always on my last leg flight to Bon Air, places like that, I know they offload the plane in the rear.
Yeah.
So I'll sit in the very back, like almost to the last row if I can get it.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there, and I met this really cool guy, just a cool dude from Florida. And he was, there with his son and a buddy of his, and they were going to party. And I'm like, well, I'm taking a class. He invited me out. He's like, we didn't go out, man. You're a cool guy. And I'm like, I'm taking a class, man. I'm going to be up at 6 a.m. So anyways, long story short, he ordered a bunch of cocktails on the flight. And the stewardess was like, well, if you can answer these questions about Jack Daniels, you can get them for free. He bombed every question. She's like, no, you can have them for free. And I said, well, you know what? If he's drinking, I'm going to have a cocktail. I never really drink when I fly, but screw it, right? Because I'm not diving the next day.
Right.
I was like, screw it. I'll start right now. Free cocktails. She was just like, you guys are cool. I like you. She was just, I stumbled off the plane. It was bad. That was the first time I ever drank on a flight. Like, you've traveled with me before. I don't drink in the airports. I don't drink when I'm flying. I just don't like to. It's just not fun to me. I'd rather just watch my movies on my phone and.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it.
So, anyways, back to Drysuits. We kind of went off on a definite big tangent there. But.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I know we've mentioned it several times, but training is really important, especially in a dry suit.
Yeah.
There are places where dry suits are really prevalent where you can get rentals. Here in the Midwest, most places that are going to require you to have it by your own, which that's, that's a big pill to swallow, to buy something you don't know if you're going to like at that price tag before you ever really get to dive it. But the flip side of that coin is most places, or any place, is not going to rent you one unless you've got unless you're taking the class or have this card anyway. Right.
But that's a good thing.
Yeah, that is a good thing. That's a wonderful thing. I mean, that dry suits are one of those deals that they're I don't want to get all super serious on it, but they're serious business. It's not like
it's one of the certs I would say, like, so I have two types of specialty certs, right?
Yeah.
I've got what I would call real specialty certs.
Uh-huh.
I would say deep diver,
well,
because you have to have it to proceed to other classes.
Yep.
So any cert that you have to have to proceed to a new class, right? Nitrox, you have to show that card.
Yeah.
Even you and I to this day, I have to show that card if I'm going to get that gas.
Right.
If I want to get Trimix, I have to show that I'm certified to dive it and to dive the blend I want to get.
Right.
Those are real certs. Some what I like to call your
fun certs.
Fun certs would be like boat diver.
Yeah. Right.
No one's going to tell you can't dive on a boat because you're not a boat diver.
Right.
Dry suit is what I would say. No, I'm not dogging on a boat diver. If you get a boat diver cert, I've got one myself. Yeah. It's a great cert to have. It's cool especially if you're from the Midwest or you're from places where you don't have boats. You learn about boats. You learn boat terminology anyways. But the point is, dry suit is one of those certs. You have to have it to rent one. Now, where I find the fallacy is I can buy a dry suit without having a cert.
Yeah.
And when I say that, because you can go online and use Amazon and get pretty much anything now.
Well,
now, you walk into a dive shop and try to buy a dry suit. No, they're not going to sell it to you until you get a cert, or they're going to give you a cert with the suit.
Yeah.
But my recommendation, being in the fact that anybody can buy a dry suit without the cert, you need to take the class. You need to dive with a good instructor on a dry suit so you don't hurt yourself, because you can hurt yourself. And it's very evident. Go look up the girl that passed away because of a dry suit dive.
Well, I'll give an example. Again, this is me throwing myself on the bus when I do something stupid. It was hilarious in retrospectively, but because of the training I got in the dry suit class, I was, no bullshit, able to save my own life.
Yeah.
It was early spring. My parents had a 5 foot deep above ground pool, and the cover had torn over the winter, so it was just full of shit. And so I'm like, I'll throw in my dry suit, I'll hop in there and I'll scoop all the leaves and sticks and things out. And with my entire family watching, my kids, my wife, my parents, my sister, my nephews, like, hey, this will be kind of funny. And I inflated the suit, big, huge, like I'm State Puff Marshmallow Man. And I thought, well, I'll lean back and show them how to float. What happened when I did that?
You flipped over your head.
Flipped upside down, and now all the air is rushed to my feet. And I'm bobbing upside down. I don't have any regulator on or anything like that. I'm just basically in the suit to stay warm. And the first thought that was running through my head is I'm like, I can't believe I'm going to die like this, being an idiot in front of my parents. And then I remembered, oh, no, just tuck and roll. And so I did the tuck and roll that you learn for when that situation, if it happens. And I tucked and I rolled and I got back up and everything was fine.
Well, like one of the skills in dry suit, though, is like even the patty dry suit, is you have to disconnect your inflator hose with a glove on, with your gloves on. And I have students say, well, it's really hard. Can I take my, I'm like, no, you cannot take your glove off. You have to do it with your gloves on, because, and then I tell them the story about the time I got pinned to a ceiling of a cave. Yeah. Now, granted, I have my cave gloves on, so I have my thumb and pointer finger holes cut. I cut the fingers. I cut my gloves. And yes, I do lose feeling in those fingers if the water's cold enough, but I can still feel line.
Manipulate,
I can manipulate line. I can feel it. But imagine you have a runaway inflator and you can't, because you've never practiced. So that's why we practice. We practice in a safe environment where you have an instructor that could. Yeah. Because if you have a runaway inflator, that's a bad day. Yeah. You're gonna get bent. You're gonna get hurt. Yeah. You get a squeeze. Yeah.
It can squeeze you so hard you can't breathe.
You know, and that like when you think about it, you transition that over into like side mount diving in a dry suit. What bottle do you pass off if you're going to go through a tight restriction? If you're going to pass off your long hose bottle, so move your dry suit inflator hose to your other side, because if you're going to lose anything, you're going to lose your. You'll want to lose your BCD inflator, right? If you're going to take that bottle and send it off, because you can survive without a BCD. Yeah. You can't survive a squeeze. Right. Because it can squeeze you to the point where you cannot take a breath in. Yeah. That's how bad these suits can squeeze you. And that's what happened to that poor young lady. Yeah. Yeah. So.
Well, yeah, man, dry suits.
Man, we talked a lot of doom and gloom on dry suits, though, I feel like. Yeah. And here's the thing, like, I love diving dry. Like, I'm so excited to go get my new suit. Like,
yeah, well, and I'm always excited when I get my dry suit out, because it means it's going to be a fun dive, right? There's going to be some.
So I equated to this. Like, I had a lady one time, I was putting my suit on at the lake. I popped down there by myself. I was doing a rebreather dive. I was going to go down like 140, 150. And I got all my tanks and stuff down, because you could definitely want to, even during the winter time, you definitely want to haul your crap down and have everything set up. Yeah. I'm throwing my suit on. I throw my undergarments on. I already put my condom catheter on in the bathroom. But this lady popped over as I'm getting the feet on, and I'm putting this on. And as I'm like connecting things, and she goes, "What's that hose?" And I explained to her, I was like, "Well, TMI, this is my P valve. This is how I can
hooking up to plumbing."
I'm hooking up to my undercarriage. And as I'm putting this suit on, she goes, you're like an astronaut. That's why she put it. And I thought about it later on. I'm like, she's about right. I mean, this is like putting on a spacesuit. You're going into a hospitable environment. Inhospitable environment, sorry. An ideal age. You cannot survive without the suit. You'll go into hypothermia and shock. And it's a process. It's a procedure to put all this stuff on. And in a way, it's kind of cool when you think about it. You're like, you're putting on all these undergarments to stay warm. You're putting on socks a certain way to like, and then you're putting on a suit, and then you're hooking up to a relief valve, so to speak. And then, you put the suit on, you zip it up, you seal yourself into it. You're all right. Now you're sealed in. Now you put on everything on top of that, computers and knives or whatever. And then you put your BCD on, or you put your doubles on, and then you go down and you start hooking tanks on yourself. And then so you can get your hood on and you get your gloves on, and now you're encapsulated in the suit. Yeah. And let's not to mention dry gloves. Yeah. You start putting on dry gloves, you're going to need a buddy. Yeah. Because once you're in those dry gloves, you
can't zip it up or anything, Yeah, go back. I know we talk about P valves because we're 12-year-old kids here, but the last class I taught down at the lake was the last weekend in October of last year, and so I wore my dry suit. I was like, sorry, kids. But on the last dive of the class, dive 4, I was in the water waiting for my students to come in, and I was standing there. I was peeing, and one of them looked at me and he goes, "You look like you're peeing." I was like, "I am," and he's like, "Just inside your suit?" I was like, "No, man, I'm hooked up to plumbing. It's all good. We're good."
It's kind of cool, and just to add to P valves, that is if you already have a dry suit but you don't have a P valve, and you're thinking about getting one installed, they're awesome, but they're also it's like playing the lottery.
It's kind of temperamental a little bit. Yeah.
So I'll refer back to my dive on the Oriskany. I peed at depth. Now, this is an unbalanced P valve, so there's a process to this, right? And you have to know the process to an unbalanced. And I would say the best way to learn is on an unbalanced, and then move to a balanced, because you won't make the mistake of switching. If you go the other way, it could be really bad if you understand pressure and physics. So I charged the line, so to speak. You feel a little back pressure, and you're like, okay. And then you open the nut. Yeah. There's a little bolt that you unscrew. Yeah. And you're supposed to feel warm water come out. I didn't feel anything warm come out. I'm like, oh, that's bad. But I felt the relief from the pressure. So I'm like, okay. Well, that either went inside my suit or it didn't. So the whole dive, I'm like, okay, I either peed myself or I didn't. Yep. Then I have a 2-hour boat ride back to shore. Yep. I'm like, I'm not taking this suit off. Because I either peed myself or I didn't. I'll just find out when I get to the restroom. So we got back to the dock. We docked. I unloaded my stuff. I'm like, and I jokingly told Paul Timor, the head of raid, because he happened to be there, and became good friends with him actually on that dive, which is awesome. He's a great guy. And I said, "Hey, I'm gonna use the restroom." He's like, "You bet on yourself, mate," because he's British, and I'm like, "Yeah, we'll see." Go to the bathroom, strip down a little bit, and I go, "Okay, I'm dry." It's just the water was chilly enough to where I just didn't feel it. Yeah, so it was awesome. So it worked out well. But yeah, it's a gamble, man. It's kind of, in a way, like, it's funny to tell that story later on, because it's like that's kind of fun. But at the time, I'm like, I just pissed all over myself in my boxers. And
yep, for sure. Yeah. All right. Well, man, I think that was a pretty good episode about dry suits. If you got any questions about them, leave it in the comments. Happy to answer it.
Yeah.
And
we definitely went off some tangents there. Those will lead into some other episodes that we're going to do.
But that's why I love these podcasts. It's all about the tangents.
We didn't drink as much as we normally do here.
Well, that's why this one was probably a little bit more coherent.
Probably. Probably less entertaining, but more coherent.
Yeah, we'll see. All right. Take care. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
I'm just a clown. That's what they say.